cartoon.
That's nice. That's nice.
Okay, we are now live. Thank you, audience members, for joining us here today. We have Angelique, who's going to talk to us about her experiences. So, Angelique is a New York Times bestselling author for A Trail of Memories and has written a series of young adult novels. She is also currently dedicating a lot of time to cancer awareness as she is a survivor herself, and has also published a book in this genre called Chemo, Cupcakes and Carpools: How to Get Through Chemo with Your Family, Your Marriage, and Your Sanity Intact. And she's now a teacher for a creative writing program. And with all of that, we are so excited to have her here today to hear her story and learn from all the wonderful advice that she has to give. Thank you so much again for joining us. Before we get started on everything, could you just give a quick introduction of yourself and your experiences?
Okay, so I'm 11 and a half year cancer survivor. I was diagnosed at 45. My daughters were 7 and 11, and I was teaching creative writing and literature to my older daughter's 6th grade class, and then guest teaching other places. And it was a really, really busy year for me, and then became just really busy. So I went through all of the cancer thing. I went through raising young girls with a mom with breast cancer, which is its own way of loaded life. And I learned a lot at that time about how to talk to my kids about it in a way that was hopefully not scary, but also I didn't want to overpromise because I had no idea. You know, I didn't know I was going to sit here. I didn't know I was going to watch both my girls graduate from high school. I wanted to get them through, 2nd and 6th grade at that time. And I have been a writer all my life. I don't have a series of YAs. I wish I did. I'm working on a middle grade novel at the moment that has my heart and soul in it. So as far as the cancer community, I've been very active. I've raised money for the Revlon Run Walk because that was created to back one of the life-saving medications that I was on, Herceptin. And I also have taught somewhere upwards of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 girls and women how to do breast self-exam. I'm very, very passionate about self-awareness, self-advocacy, and being in charge of your own body. And I felt that as I was teaching these girls that there was no shame in touching their bodies and getting to know them. The same way if you bit down on something and your tooth hurt, you go to the dentist. You need to know the landscape of your body. You need to know what your moles look like. You need to know what your breasts feel like. And also at the same time, making sure that they felt comfortable doing it. They had a method of how to do it. So I worked with a nonprofit teaching their method, which I thought was really exceptional. And I did that at my high school, a couple of local high schools, a couple of women's groups. And I kept going back to the high schools. And it was really interesting because I would teach it and then we would talk. And I found that I felt that if girls and women feel like it's okay to touch their bodies, they become much more choosy about who they allow to do that. As they start dating, what degree they feel comfortable with, and ownership of something, that they're not scared of this, being that they are, especially at a time when they've gone through a lot of changes, starting at, 8 or 10, when you start developing breasts and you're like, what are these things? And some people develop and some people don't. I was late on that schedule. I was very small until I was a senior in high school. And then all of a sudden, it's like all of a sudden I had breasts. So it was a very interesting experience for me. And I feel very passionate about it. I find it interesting that the last 2 times I've been asked to speak about my experience and my way of keeping my mind straight and the way writing came into it. The night before, I get a phone call from someone I love who's been diagnosed. And it's happened twice now. And I'm kind of flabbergasted. I'm like, last night I got on the phone. I was like, I don't believe this conversation is happening before I come talk to you, because it was just wild to me. And and my husband heard me as he's like, are you already talking to them? I'm like, no, that's tomorrow. I'm friend who needs me right now. So, you know, I'm always willing to pick up the phone, and I'm always willing to email, and I'm always willing to reach out, because it's a very scary moment. But, you know, if you don't avoid what you think is wrong, it gets to be less scary.
Oh my God. First, I'm sorry to hear that this repeated pattern of having to talk to someone who's recently diagnosed. That's always hard, especially when you're supposed to get up the next morning at 7 o'clock or earlier to talk to a bunch of children about cancer. So I'm sorry about that.
You're my audience. You know, you're the group that I'm writing novels for, and you're the group that, because my daughters were so young, and my cancer journey has been since that diagnosis, actually since I found that lump, all the way along, I've had to deal with different ages and stages with my girls. And it's just, you know, it's like, I want you two and everybody who's watching to learn the landscape of their bodies.
Mhm.
I want the guys to learn the landscape of their bodies. I want them to learn the landscape of their testicles and their chest and everything else, because men get diagnosed. I mean, in the United States, the year I got diagnosed in 2009, 240,000 some odd women would get diagnosed with breast cancer, and 2,400 men. The main difference is that men sort of go along with the younger women, in that they get diagnosed later because they don't think they can have it, and people around them don't think they can have it. When I was diagnosed, there was a 10-month-old and a 10-year-old in California that were diagnosed at the same, like within the same month or two of me. And I was like in the paper going, are you kidding me? This kid was 10 months old, had a lump in her chest. This little girl who's 10, 11 years old has a lump in her chest. She has breast cancer. And so there's no age. You know, it's like COVID. There's no age. It can affect anybody. And so the better you, and there's no prevention, there's no vaccine, there's no nothing that can stop it. So the best weapon you have is to know your own body well enough to say to your doctor, this isn't right. Say to your mom, this isn't right. Say to whoever is important in your life that will listen to you, a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, it doesn't matter. Somebody start the ball rolling going, this is different for me. It's the most important thing. And most women know. And for me, I mean, I put shower gel, okay, in the shower, put the shower gel on my hands, put my hands under the spout. I look like I'm like offering you something. Put my hands under the spout. And instead of going like this, which makes sense because you're cupping water and shower gel, I went up under my bosom and went straight onto this massive lump that had not been there before. And it was the size of a golf ball. And I was like, you know, this stream of profanity came out of me. And then I went and checked it again. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to get panicked. I'm going to see if it's on the other side. If it's on the other side, like, what's the chance of it being anything bad? And it was not on the other side. When I was traveling, when I got home, I had a mammogram, an ultrasound, and a fine needle aspiration. All three said I did not have cancer. I was fine. And it wasn't until 2 months later, when I did an MRI, that we found out that I had cancer. So it was a weird time. Unless you had a family history, there was no MRI. I said, I'll pay for it. Very different in the United States with our health insurance situation. There's a cash price and there's an insurance price. The cash price was $1,300. The insurance price was $4,000. $4,500 or something. It was over $4,000. And so I said, I'll pay cash. And I told the hospital, I'll pay cash. Give me the MRI. And so I put down my card. I paid my $1,300 because my insurance was not going to cover it. And then they billed me for the difference later. And I called them up and I said, no, you don't get to bill me. I paid cash. So that was the craziness pre ACA, pre Obamacare, if you've heard the term. It's not that way now, but it was a real learning experience of me going, no, I don't like this. This is still here. It hasn't disappeared. What are we going to do about it? What can I do about it? And luckily I had a doctor who believed me, believed in me, and thought it made sense that we keep looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's my in a nutshell story.
I had a question building off of your story. You said that there was nothing in the earlier like tests and scans about it. So what was it within you that encouraged you to take that step further? Because obviously a lot of people would have stopped because it's so expensive to get an MRI, right?
It was really expensive. I was really glad I had good credit. Build your credit. Credit cards can save your life. It saved mine. So, I had my annual checkup April 19th. June 24th, I'm in the shower in New Jersey, across the country, in a hotel. And that's when I discovered this lump. Now, I knew it hadn't been there when my doctor checked me in April. Had I checked my breast between? No, I hadn't. I'll be very honest. I was not really consistent with it, but it was so big. I was blessed. It was something I could not ignore. And so my doctor had said to me after all those tests came back, and I've seen the ultrasound, there's nothing there. It should show up as white. Does not show. My doctor said to me, go have a period, go have two. Let's see if it's a cyst and it just resolves with your hormonal changes. I said, okay. So I went off for 2 months. I checked my breasts only on Mondays. On 2 occasions, convinced myself it was gone. Like mentally, it was like a touch hallucination. Like I put my hand there and I was like, oh, it's gone. And went on about my day, hanging out with my kids and my husband. And when I got back, he's like, it's still there. And I said, yeah, I know. What do we do? And he's like, get dressed and come to my office. So I literally followed him out the door, buttoning my shirt, going, what do we do, to the back of his, the back of his head. And he throws over his shoulder, well, you could get an MRI, but your insurance isn't going to pay for it. And I said, I'll pay for it. And he turned around and he stopped at this counter and he looked at the woman who was sitting there and he said, make her an appointment for an MRI. My MRI experience was horrific, quite honestly, not because of the MRI itself, but because I was sat on a folding chair in a hallway for about an hour and a half to 2 hours by myself, waiting to go in. And that was a whole other level of power that came over me that day. I was, sitting there going, this is the dividing line right here between, do I have cancer and do I not have cancer? And once I walk through that door, it's going to change one way or the other. And they left me there. They just left me there in my little paper gown with the, IV in my arm. And I was like, okay, this is fun. But it was, I just knew it hadn't been there. And it was, like I said, the way it felt to me was it was the size of a golf ball. If it had been tiny, I don't know if I would have been so, driven. But it scared me so much when I found it. And I barely touched myself. I just brushed over my breast and it was like there. So, I thank you, God, I kept going. And thank you, Dr. Jerry Steiner, who kept going with me, And then he presented it. So they say at that time, I said, why didn't it show up? He said, 4%. 4% don't show up on mammogram and ultrasound. He said, the fine needle, I guess I missed it. I didn't go, I went into the tumor, but maybe we didn't get cancer cells out. I don't know why. And he got the MRI results, and then he presented them at the weekly meeting that all the oncologists and breast surgeons and radiologists and all the techies all go to every Thursday at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. They had this meeting every Thursday, and he presented me and he said, what do you all think? And they were like, she's got cancer. We're looking at it now. So, he just couldn't quite believe it because everything came back. It was unusual.
Mm-hmm.
And going off of, trusting yourself and knowing your body and knowing when to continue, how do you, I don't know how to phrase this well. How many people do you think know the importance of trusting yourself and trusting your instincts and knowing when to keep going?
It's really interesting. I had a woman who was a mother of a classmate of my daughter's said to me, she had the same experience. She had a lump in her breast. She had a fine needle, she had a ultrasound and a mammogram, and it came back with nothing. And she's standing there talking to myself and another woman who's got cancer, who's gene positive, and has been chasing it around her body for like 7 years by this point. And she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I don't think you should stop going. Like, I just think I said, you have to get comfortable. Whatever. I think you have to get comfortable, and you have to be willing to stare it in the face and say, I'm going to go until the answer makes sense to me." She's fine, never had cancer, which is great. But like for me, I think, it was like a sledgehammer to my head. Like it was just so giant and I couldn't ignore it. And, if anybody touched me, if my husband had touched my breast at that moment, he would have been like, oh, because it was just so apparent. And I think that we have to have confidence as human beings, no matter what sex you're born into or what sex how you identify. It doesn't matter. Any kind of cancer isn't an equal opportunity employer. So, I mean, I have a friend who had, who just didn't feel well, like her stomach kept hurting, turned out to be pancreatic. She got probably 4 more years than she would have if she hadn't kept saying, no, this isn't right. So you got to go with your gut, and you have to ask yourself if you're ignoring it because you're scared. Because if you're ignoring it because you're scared, that's exactly when you need to talk to a doctor. It's exactly when you need to say that. And yesterday I was at the dermatologist and I said, I have this weird thing with my lip. Like sometimes it gets really, really dry in one place. Can you take a look? And he looked and he's like, there's nothing there. And he said, but if it happens again, I will see you that day. Like, just call me. And I'm like, it hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened since before COVID, because I think we've all been wearing masks. So I think whatever gets irritated by whatever, it's been just, covered up. But I think you have to trust yourself and you have to trust your instincts, and you have to say, I am going to pursue this the way I would pursue my career, the way I would pursue an A in a class, the way I would pursue a boy I liked, the way I would pursue whatever. I have to go to where I know the answer that lets me sleep at night. That's really important.
Absolutely. And to what extent do you think this like confidence in yourself and this ability and sense of security to go that one step further, to what extent do you think that makes cancer diagnosis, cancer treatment just a little bit easier?
I think 100% makes it easier. I mean, am I allowed to cuss? It's lousy. Almost said the other word. It's lousy. Like every part, there's nothing good about it. But the good part is that 12 years ago, I had a lump in my breast and we didn't think it was cancer. And I'm still here. And if I hadn't pursued that, I would be dead. I don't know. I might be living with stage 4 metastatic, might be, but in the 2 weeks between my MRI and my surgery, it was in the duct and out of the duct. So it was encapsulated in the duct in my breast when I got the MRI. And 2 weeks later, when they took it out of me and they did the pathology, it was into the breast tissue. If I'd waited another 2 weeks, it would have been into my lymph nodes. It was not going to, disappear. So, I have confidence as a human being. I will say that I'm a very secure person 90% of the time. Sometimes it seems more like 60-40, but I will say that. I also was 45 years old, so I wasn't a kid, and there is something to be said for life experience and doing that. But the best thing you can do in your life is self-advocate. It's standing up to the people who say no. It's saying, no, I'm going to do it anyway because I can pursue this career. I have a friend who wanted to pilot the space shuttle, and she finally had to say she couldn't because they wouldn't let her in the simulator, the boys club. So she ended up with a different career, but she went as far as she could. And she got to the point where it was, can I get in the simulator often enough to get my hours? And they just kept cutting her out. She was the first woman, or one of the first women. So, it's like, but you pursue it, you pursue it until it just says, no, absolutely everything's fine. I think that fear is a really, they say fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear can stop you. Being afraid of risk can stop you. And I don't think anybody should go jump off a building. I think that, if there's a whole bunch of firemen down there with a big blow up thing and you're 3 stories up and they're like, jump, 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 the building's on fire, you jump. So you look at it and say, it's the future. I know more. What's my future? What's my future? And what do I want it to be? I know more young women now, women under the age of 30 who are diagnosed in their 20s, who are like, my doctor told me I couldn't have cancer. My doctor told me I couldn't have cancer. I hear it all the time. And they're like, but I just kept insisting we test, insisting I get that. So, if you've got a doctor who says, you can't have it, you're too young, go to a different doctor, get another opinion, talk to the people that you respect in your life. And unfortunately, especially with breast cancer, it's really common. So you're going to know somebody.
And, fear, as you mentioned, fear can go like 2 ways. It can either, put you off from what you're facing, or it can motivate you to, put you through and get you through the problem. And what advice would you give to people who are, scared to advocate or scared to get to know their body just in case they find something, or scared to open up to someone?
So I'll tell you a funny story. So I was doing a fundraiser for a group called Get in Touch Foundation. They have a system of teaching young girls and women how to do breast self-exam. And they have this thing called the daisy wheel. And it's actually a thing you can hold in your hand, right? And it turns and it gives you these 8 steps of doing a breast self-exam. And I'm doing this fundraiser, and we're having a meeting at the venue with the woman, and that's helping us there, and we're looking at table settings and how we're going to place things on the tables. And I pulled out what they call the daisy wheel. I pulled it out and I sat it on the table. I'm like, well, do we want to put it against the glass? Do we want to put it against the flowers? Where do we want it? Because we're giving one to everybody who came. And she picks it up and she's like, what's this? I said, well, that's how you learn how to do breast self-exam. And she dropped it like it was on fire. Okay. Like it was on fire, like boom. And I was like, I looked at her and I said, what? And she said, that scares me. And I said, that shouldn't scare you. What I've been through, that should scare you. Getting to know you're the only person who is in your body, right? You are the only person who owns this being that you are, and you are in charge of feeding and watering and exercising and keeping your mind straight and pursuing the things that make you feel good, excite you, keep your mind happy, because we're here for 100 years, right? Especially your generation. It's like 100 years, let's just say, pretty much, right? So what are you going to do with it? And if you want to my goal is I want to feel good for 100 years. I want to be strong enough to do the things I want to do. I don't need to lift 75 pounds over my head. I just need to be able to pick up a grandchild when I have one. I just want to be able to hike. I want to be able to travel. So my physical fitness is important to me, but I'm not like a rock, hard person. I walk every day and I do some weights and I do some other things. And I do those things to keep me healthy. And it was very interesting because 2 days before the event, I'm finalizing things. I can't get a hold of her. I cannot get a hold of this woman. I'm like leaving her messages. I'm emailing her. I'm texting her. I'm leaving her messages. They're like, she's not here. She's not here. She's not here. Finally, 7 hours go by and she calls me. And I'm like, this is 2 days before we're having, 150 people at her hotel. And she says, I said, where were you? And she said, oh, I went to get my mammogram. And I thought, yes, that is what this is all about, right? It's about taking whatever steps you need to take, knowing your family history, knowing if anybody ever had it. Doesn't mean you're going to. I mean, there's no family history except for my great grandmother who got it in 1901. And so there's a lot of questions as to, how she managed to, how she got breast cancer in the first place. I don't even know. She had like 7 kids and nursed them all. So, but, everybody has a different story, but there was nobody in between, so, but it's good to know those things. And so I think the question is, what happens if I do nothing? The best result is you go to the doctor, they do all the tests, and you feel comfortable with them saying, you're absolutely fine. If I had woken up from my double mastectomy and they had said, I'm so sorry, you never had cancer, I would have said, give me a new set, let's move on. Let's just go, because it was scary. But I don't know any woman who has ever regretted having testing done to find out. I do know women who put things off. I do know women who didn't have the grace of finding it early. Mm-hmm. You find it early, you find it at 0 or 1, you have a 99% survival rate. I mean, we probably don't have a 99% survival rate walking down the street in a major city, just because of buses and whatever, right? So I would say, like, it's so good. The treatments are good. The surgeries are good. The reconstruction is good. Things work, but you have to get in there early enough that you have that fighting chance. You don't want to be diagnosed when it's too many places. Mm-hmm. You want to get it before.
Absolutely.
So I'm just saying, go, 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 go. Talk to your doctor. Go, go, go. Talk to your doctor. I can't give you the confidence to do it. I could just say, this is the most important answer I need until I ask somebody to marry me. And then I need, or I ask my kid if they, smoked weed on a weekend or whatever. But, there's answers in life that you really, really need. This is one of them. Your health is number one, because you don't get that 100 years unless you're taking care of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such an important message. Thank you. Like, it's something that people need to hear, and they just don't hear it enough.
Yeah, we're told to respect our doctors.
Yeah.
Like my mother's generation is respect the doctors. The doctors are God. The doctors know everything, right? And I'm like, well, but I need to know more. Mm-hmm. And my doctor's willing to, send me to another doctor or whatever. But yeah, now it's a more working relationship idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people also just don't have trust within themselves. Like what you were saying, it's not that the doctor's right or wrong, but am I right to go that extra step, right? And that's exactly what you've been saying. And another question that we had that's really closely connected to this is, how do you go from one, just like getting to self-awareness and taking that step to want self-awareness is an incredible jump. And then how do you go from that being comfortable there, to then jumping even more to self-advocating for yourself, saying, this is what I need, this is what I want?
I think it's part of the same thing.
Okay.
I think that once you have the confidence to say, that answer doesn't sit right with me, and I need to know more about what's going on inside me, why that mole looks like that, why my tooth hurts. It's just the next step. It's just you're walking forward. And if you want, I was saying this to my girlfriend last night, when you get diagnosed with breast cancer, it's like that joke about being a parent. I'm a chauffeur, I'm a doctor, I'm a psychologist, I'm a mom, I'm a cook, I'm a nurse, right? You instantly overnight are asked to be an oncologist, a breast surgeon, a reconstructive surgeon, make decisions about implants, if you're having them, if you're not having them, what size, what kind, blah, blah, blah. over the muscle, under the muscle, what kind of scars, where do you want your scars? Do you want to keep your nipples? Can you keep your nipples? I mean, it's like you get so inundated with decisions that most people go to medical school to determine the answers to, and you're given an hour, like you have cancer, blah, blah, blah. Like, now what do we do? And so I think that there's technical stuff, there's taking notes, and there's keeping a notebook, there's taking a friend to those appointments to say, be somebody there to say, wait a second, she had another question. Because if I went today with my girlfriend to the plastic surgeon, she was like, I hadn't thought about that. It would be, where are those scars going to be? Because there are choices now depending on the placement of your tumor. A lot of people I know, and the people I know that are previvors that are having preventative mastectomies because they have they're gene positive, they're having their scars are underneath, they're in the fold underneath their breast. So for the most part, they're hidden, not completely, but pretty good. So I didn't have that option. So it wasn't a thing that was done then, or it was the placement of my tumor, probably both. So I think sometimes having someone with you on those appointments is really important. I think being able to have somebody who's got your back, and like is saying, okay, no, wait a second, we have one more question. I've got this list here. Have you asked everything? And slowing down that doctor, because depending on your health system, doctors have so much time, right? Maybe they're doing 10 minutes a patient, whatever it is. It's like got better with going to the doctor during COVID shutdown in the States was fantastic because nobody was in the office. You just walked in, you sat down for like 2 minutes and you were in and seen. I mean, there was no 30-minute, 40-minute hour wait. But having somebody there saying, wait, slow down. Let's just slow down a second. She has more questions here. We need to answer them. So that, because you get very overwhelmed. And so that can help. It can be a girlfriend, it can be a boyfriend, it can be your mom, it can be whoever, just somebody with you to say, there's more here. And we want to get, we're making decisions. She's making decisions very methodically. I want these questions answered by every surgeon so that I know. So I think that helps a lot. It helps if you have somebody who's nervy like me, who's just going to say, no, wait a second. You're not leaving yet. My mother told a story about my father. My dad was a amazing author and a storyteller. And the doctor who delivered me was very well known for coming in to catch the baby, essentially. And he would leave. He'd come in and he'd see you and he'd say, okay, fine. I'll see you when the baby comes. But my dad didn't want him to leave the room. So my dad basically kind of took him by the arm, sat him down and told him stories for like 2 hours and kept him in the room. But, that part is hard. And that part, sometimes you need somebody with you. And that's something that I think is really important. I didn't have that luxury because my kids were little and I was doing all my treatment an hour away and all my doctors were an hour away. And so somebody had to be taking the kids to and from. So my husband was doing that and I was doing the other. And it was about 2 years after my initial diagnosis that I got to a point where I couldn't hear the doctor, which is, I think, rather exceptional. I'd never heard of anybody having the experience, but I had a complication and I was in talking to a lung surgeon and he was talking to me and he sounded like one of the adults in the Peanuts cartoon. Womp, 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 right? And I'm sitting there listening to him and he says, so I want to see you back here on Tuesday. And I said, okay. And I got in the car and my husband said, called him and he said, what did he say? And I said, I'm going back on Tuesday and you need to go with me because I have no idea what he said. I don't know. I sat there and I couldn't hear him. He's like, he was talking softly. I'm like, no. It was gobbledygook coming out of his mouth. I am like, I hit my limit. Absolutely hit my limit. So, that part's really difficult. So it's great if you can have somebody with you.
And, comfort and support is always, immensely helpful when you're going through such a hard time. And just wanted to know, like, for you, what is your, like, best type of comfort? Is it from, like, a person, an environment, friends, anything?
I love, I love being home, being home. And I used to come home after chemo and take a nap with my dog, not the new one, obviously. And he would lie there on the bed with me. And so it was, for me, it was being with my family and just being cocooned that way. I love being with my mom, and she was stalwart and amazing, and basically never left my side. Um, and so Christopher, my husband, and my mom would sort of trade off on chemo days. He'd drive me in, and she'd drive me to her house. I'd spend a night, and then I'd go home the next day. And that worked out really, really well for our family, because I wasn't, you feel pretty crappy chemo week. So, I just got a little bit more time before I had to jump into mom duty. And, you know, I have my TED talk. My kids saved me. And by that, I would say is I had no choice. I had to get up in the morning. I could not fall into a deep depression. I could not fall into a pity me thing, except, like, that isn't my style anyway, for the most part. But I couldn't, because I had two kids who needed to get up, have breakfast, have lunches made, go off to school, go to soccer practice, hang out with their friends. And that ended up being something that was really, really amazing, because there was this instituted schedule that was there for me. And if I'd lived alone, I don't know what that would have been like. I just didn't have a choice. Let's just say the fastest way to find my daughters was to either get on the phone or take a shower. Like, I was walking into the bathroom, everybody came from everywhere. So it was like, I was like, how do I find people? Just trying to do one thing. But it was, that part was great, because I didn't have a choice. And I would get up even when I felt horrific, and I would make breakfast. I would make their lunches to take to school. My husband would drive them. I'd go back to bed, and I would take a walk for about, like, depending on what day it was, in the middle of the day, I would take a walk. Then I'd go back and rest again, so that when they came home from 3 to 7, I was okay. I would, like, have enough energy to baths, dinner, homework, bedtime, and still create. I wanted their lives to stay as normal as possible, with, the mom with no hair, and, the weird thing in her arm, and the weird scars on her chest, and all of that.
Mhm. That's, of course, extremely hard. And I think the pattern that came out of what you just said is this need for a schedule, this need to have something to get you up in the morning and keep
Yes.
going.
Yes.
And that's something I think a lot of people find very challenging, to have this balance between, okay, yeah, getting up in the morning, I have to do this, 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 and this, but then also taking a step back, especially with a cancer diagnosis and treatment, saying, okay, now I need to sit down. I need to just
Right.
take a breather and stop the busy schedule. How were you able to, and how would you recommend other people to find that sort of beautiful balance?
Okay, so the one thing is a really practical thing. One thing is, if you're in active treatment, like if you're starting chemo, keep a journal, and mark down, like, a calendar, like, list of what medicines you're taking, and how you're feeling, and what side effects you're having, and how that, what you're taking to offset those side effects. Really, really important to just get this, like, flow chart going, so you can see, because how you feel that first week of chemo is kind of how you're going to feel pretty much every chemo physically. There's going to be, and I used to say, okay, Saturday's coming. I did chemo on Tuesday. And by Saturday, my energy was starting to really come back up, and I was chemo normal. Chemo normal was not normal, but it was what I was until the next chemo. And I was still, like, at 7 o'clock at night, I went to bed. I would put my kids to bed, and I would go to bed when they, my husband was home. He would, take over at that point. They knew that I was going to take medicine that made me sleepy, because I was taking, they gave me Ativan for, as an anti-nausea. And I know it's an anti-anxiety, so that probably helped. I think and that's the other thing. getting help mentally is really important. And I was given that drug because of its anti-nausea properties, but I am well aware that it had other gifts for me. But it also made me incredibly sleepy. So I would only take it, 7 o'clock at night, I would take my Ativan and I would go to bed. And I paced myself. And not everybody has that grace. But if you can sort of figure that out, you know that if you have major surgery, the doctors say you can't go back to your normal stuff. They always give you 6 weeks. They always say it's about 6 weeks. So for about 2 weeks, you're going to feel pretty crappy, but you're going to start feeling better after about day 4, right? You're going to start feeling better and better and better. So if you can map that out for yourself, you can make a life schedule. So for me, I mapped out how I felt with chemo, and I knew when I needed help and what kind of help I needed. I knew that I needed, my girlfriend to drive my kid to soccer practice, or we had a friend who lived right close to the soccer fields for our older daughter. And she would meet Christopher at the soccer fields. And when he dropped our older daughter off, and she would bring her home. And that was great because it was 30 minutes away. So it was like, oh, this is fantastic because we got a flow. People will say, what can I do? And if you don't have an instant idea or you are overwhelmed, you say, I'm putting you on the list and I'm going to ask. We played round robin with kids a couple of times, and the soccer teams were great because my older daughters in particular, after a game, Kate would be like, oh, can so-and-so come over? And I'm like, sure. And their parents would pick them up. Nobody ever was like, can you bring her home afterward? They never did that. They all knew what I was going through, and they all just came and picked their kid up. They took my daughter overnight before some early morning tournaments. It was, everybody helped. I did not do this alone, and I did not do my kids alone, but I was also teaching. And I had not had that kind of a job in my life. I was an actress. I worked for my family business, but I'd not had something where I had to be a particular place at a particular time. We did it over Zoom 12 years ago. Okay. Zoom was it was tiny. It did not know anything. And because my doctor didn't want me during chemo to be in the classroom. So I taught, then I had my surgery, then I taught, and then I did chemo. And when I started chemo, I was on here, and I figured out a way to change what I was doing. So I would work, give a lesson, and then I would work one-on-one with each student on their writing, and then we would be done. And we combined the creative writing and the lit class. So I did it all at the same time, I think. I don't know, I might have done it separately, but I did that for the entire school year. But I had help. I had a willing teacher, and I had 15 students who loved having me in class. So, it worked.
And, coming off that idea of support from others, what advice would you give to people on how to support others constantly, but also take care of yourself at the same time?
You mean helping someone who's got a cancer diagnosis?
Yeah. Or in general.
I think that there are times when people are like, oh, let me know what I can do. Let me know what I can do. And they don't mean it. And then there are times when they do. And you learn really quickly, because the ones who don't mean it don't return your phone calls. They really just don't. I mean, I had a neighbor who saw me go out for the mail with my bald head, did not speak to me for 5 years. I live on a dead end street. She went back and forth past my house for 5 years and never spoke to me. I found that so weird. I had another neighbor, same kind of week, saw me with my bald head, got home from dropped her kids off at her house, and called me up and said, I'm on my way to the market. I'm really hoping you got a part and you shaved your head. And I said, nope, I didn't. I had cancer. And she's like, can I get you anything? And I'm like, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to the market. I said, bring me back 2 bags of salad and a roast chicken, and I'm awesome. It was like, I had somebody drop dropped the same thing off to me without even asking, just came to the door, dropped it at the door, rang the bell and said, here's your dinner. And, it was, those people, you need to keep them, you need to keep them. And I think that we can all get burned out from helping. And I think the person with cancer needs to figure out what someone's threshold is. The person who's doing the giving needs to figure out what their threshold is and do what's comfortable, because if you can do what's comfortable for you, you'll keep doing it. So my friend who was just diagnosed, I'm fairly certain I'm going to be driving her to chemo. I don't know if I'm going to drive her to every chemo, but I'm going to either drive her or pick her up, because she's going to need that. And, we had our friend who would bring our older daughter home. My husband had like 2 evenings that he was working late, and so a week. And so she was like, what can I do to help? I'm like, other than the soccer drive, I said, come be with the kids when he's working late, because I just want to take my Ativan, and I can't drive. If there's a fire and we need to leave, I'm not, like, I can get out the door with the things we need, but don't make me drive.
Thank you. We're almost at the end of our time, but I do have one more thing that I want to ask. In my school, and I'm sure Priya's done this as well, a lot of times at the end, they ask you if you were to say one more thing to give advice to someone in like a tweet, the 120 characters, that's all you got. What would you say to someone who's really struggling to find the strength to begin self-awareness and self-advocation?
Write it down for someone else. That's one. Write it down for someone else, because if you heard the words "you have cancer" an hour ago, you're an hour more experienced than the person who's just heard it. There is always someone to help. And every 12-step program, starting with AAA, is built on the idea of we help the person, we help the next person. And by doing that, you heal in yourself. That's how I started my blog. It was healing to me to write about the things that scared me and the things that excited me. It got it out of me, but I always tried to write it with the idea that the person who was going to read it was going to be newly diagnosed and searching for answers. I wanted to make it a safe place. So I would say, write it out of you, get it out of your head. The most important thing is your mindset. That is all your healing, is your mindset. And you have to do the things that do that. Get outside, look at the sun, find the joy, find the humor. There is humor in everything. I made my first joke when I was having my bracket test. And the needle was in my arm. It was a really gallows humor joke, but I made it. And I think you have to find the joy, and you have to find the moments that are good, and you have to look towards the positive. You have to, it's there. It's sometimes really hard to see. And you have to remember that you're in a tunnel. There's nothing behind you. There's just one foot in front of the other till you get to the end. And, and that's it. And there's nothing to the right or the left. There's just go on through. It's that Winston Churchill, when you're going through hell, keep going. That's it. And never, 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 never give up. He was good for those.
That's beautiful. That's a perfect way, I think, to end this. And we're spot on at 4:30 our time.
Yes. It's morning here.
That's so early. My apologies, but thank you so much for coming.
Oh, that's okay. I loved being here. You girls are great. Keep doing what you're doing. It's so important to reach out to young people and to say, just get to know your bodies, get to know your minds. Don't be afraid to ask for help, whether it's a mental thing or a physical thing or an emotional thing. Ask for help, because that's how we heal and that's how we move forward. And then see if you can help someone else, because that heals you.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Audience members, that was that from Angelique. That was an amazing interview. So much to learn from, and an amazing story from you. So thank you for that. We're going to be going on our break now. and we will begin our next live stream for our next interviewee. Thank you so much, Angelique and